Welcome back to ClickFunnels Quick Start Blueprint. This is Dan Havey with CFninjaHacks. And in this video today, we're going to continue talking about our sections, rows, and columns inside of the page editor. So let's just jump into that right away. And so let's just come down here and we will manage. And we're going to say we're going to manage this section right here. And this will open up the settings. Or else, of course, we can come over here to the gear inside of the green for the section and open up the settings that way. Now, the first thing we can do is we can change the top margin, and we're in the second section here, and we have a blue background setting on the page. And so as we move down, we go to 100. We can go more than 100 if we want. We can type in 200. You can always type numbers into these blanks. So we can say we want to go 200 down from the top on our margin. But what you can also do on margins is you can make them a negative number. So let's put in negative 200. And what that will do is this will bring the lower section up over the upper section. But you see what happens here when you do it is this demo image here is actually in front of the section, and it changes as I hover over it. And you can also see the large call to action headline right here. So let's save this page and let's see what it looks like on the preview to see if that maintained itself, and it certainly did. And so I just wanted to show you that because you can get some strange things going on when you start overlapping stuff. Now, it is a good technique to overlap stuff, but a lot of times when you are doing the overlapping like that, you really need to put in some CSS or something like that. Now, let's make this one go back to 0. But now let's come down to this section here, and clearly we have a white background on this section where this one up here had an image. And let's do the exact same thing and see what happens. Let's just go minus 100. And what happened here, let's see, actually I'm going to have to go up higher to see if we can get that white text to come through. And in fact, let me change that white text to something black so that we can see it if it does come through. That's black. And in fact, let me just change that entire button to, let's go to a custom color. All right, so now it's black. So now let's see what happens if we go here. Let's just make this 150. And now what happened? So now in this case, see, now it's something totally different. In this case here, it appears as though this section went below or behind the upper section. So let's save it and let's preview it. And so, nope, now when we came into the live page, the white went in front of the background color. So the background white color went in front of the background image, but the button is proud and in front of the other. So like I said, depending on what you got going on, depending on how everything was built, when you start moving things up and down over the top of each other, a lot of times you need to start dealing with z-index, which is what brings things front and back, and other things like positioning and whatnot. And so again, that's more for a CSS class. I just wanted you to be aware of it, that as you start doing negative margins, you could run into issues of items going over and behind things in ways that you're not really expecting them to go. So now let's see here. The next one we're going to come upon is the URL. So let's give this page a background URL. And like I said, when we were talking about the backgrounds itself, if you put in a URL here, it will override the background color. So right now we'll make a background color of yellow, but then let's come in and we will say, let's put a background image behind it. And let's just use our stop signs again. And you see here, because it was set to no repeat, it's all smushed up over to the left-hand side. But we want that to be across the whole thing. So we could tell it to repeat, and we could tell it to repeat all these different ways. We could say 100% fill width and height. So it'll take up the whole area on the width and the height. Or we could just say 100% width. And depending on how big your image is, it may go all the way across and not cover the entire area, though, again, depending on how tall your section is. And your sections the height of them will be determined by what you have inside of them. So let's say in this case here, let's go into our section, and we hadn't gotten down to the padding yet, but we could put in more padding at the top and the bottom. That's going to make it taller. So we go here, let's say even 200 on these here. Oops. Let's get that there. It's 200. Okay, so it keeps making it bigger. We can come into our row and we can give it some more height here. And so, like I said, depending on how tall your section is going to determine how much of that image you see in the background. So again, that's why a lot of times with sections, if I can't get to line up right, we'll just go in, do a little bit of CSS code and say, okay, I want this section to be, 357 pixels tall. And then that way I know that all the content, the images, everything will fit into it perfectly without having to play around with guessing at how much margin or padding or something you might need in there. But now let's go back into this section, because there's another thing we can do with the images in the sections only, not in the background on the page. And I don't think you can do it in the rows either. We'll find out in a minute. I forget. But we can do one last thing, and that is known as full center parallax. And we'll just click on that, and you saw the image change a little bit. That's not the cool part. What's cool here now is as we scroll down the page, what's going to happen is this image will be set essentially as the background image of the page, but the caveat is you will only see it through the window of this section. That's the best way I can think of describing it. So let's make this section a little bit smaller. Let's bring this down a little bit and even bring this down some. Okay, so now we're seeing where it is right now. We're not really seeing most all of it. So let's save and then preview. And now as we scroll down the page, watch, the stop sign does not move, and it fills up the entirety of the page. So it doesn't look anything like it does in the preview, so that's one important thing. But also, it is essentially fixed to the background of the page. Just like we'd put in a background image would be fixed to the background like this. In this case here, it's affixed to the background, but only visible through the window that that section creates. So parallax is always a really cool effect, especially if you know exactly how it works. But like I said, so it's fixed to the background and only visible through the window of that section. So now let's come back in, and what else can we do here? So we got our section width. Let's change it, and let's work on this one here now. So we're going to make this, we can change the width. As you've seen in the last one, we can change the widths of this. So we're going to make this medium, and so that's okay. So let's go back in. And then stickiness, let's actually go up to this top section, and let's make this one sticky. I made this one more narrow because I want to do something else with it in a minute. So we can say stick to top on scroll. So let's do this. We will save this. And now we will preview. And what will happen is this will stay in place now. As the rest of the page scrolls up behind it, that will stay in place. So we're scrolling up, and we, of course, still have the parallax effect on the other behind it. So this one here, we stuck to the top. Now let's do this. Let's stick this one here, and actually let's do this. Let's add in a new section, and let's just grab a content section. Let's just do that. Let's take this, and let's drop it in here. It doesn't want to drop, so again, we'll do our little trick. We will save it. We will pop out. We will pop back in. Oops, what do I got to do here? Pop back in. And now what we're going to do is we're going to add a new section, and we'll grab some content, and let's drop this in right there. And so what we're going to say with this section, we're going to say we want this one sticking to the bottom on, let me see here, stick to the bottom on page load. So what that's going to do is it's going to stick that to the bottom when the page loads. So it's going to kind of be down here anyway. Well, actually, let's do this. Let's move this section up here. So now it's up here. It's above this blue section, but on page load, it's actually going to get stuck down here and it will not move. So let's preview this again, and let's see if that worked out. Okay, let's load the page. I guess it had loaded already, and it is stuck down here. So it did actually what we wanted it to do. So now we have the position at the top stuck, and we have the position at the bottom stuck, and we have a little bit moving in between. And what we're having here is a problem because this is a video. It's actually an iframe where the video is inside of it, and it has a z-index that is too strong. So we'd actually have to go into the CSS code to fix this here and reduce the z-index so it went behind this element, or we'd have to take this element and pull that further forward with the z-index. But again, that's for a different day. But if you run into that problem, just reach out to me and I'll do what I can to help you out. So let's turn off these stickinesses so that we can see our page again. So we will say none. And then let's see, what else did we have here? So we have, well, let me go back in here. Let's go into this section. And we already saw this before. We got our padding. We can put padding at the top and the bottom. And of course, you can put padding as well at the right and left, and it will just make it skinnier. And it's hard to see, so let's do this. Let's just put a quick border around here. And then we will come back into our section and we will say, okay, so well, that didn't do much for us either. But you can see here now, at least on the side to side, how it narrows it up, because this area over here where the padding is getting larger, so it's pushing this closer together in the middle as that gets larger. Okay, so what else we have in the sections here? So we did all that. We're going to go to advanced. We can go to our corners and we can square off our corners. Corner radiuses, we're going to make that all. And again, we're not seeing anything here because it's white background and we're all the way out here to the edge. So let's find a section where we can actually see what's going on here. So let's say here we want 50 pixels radius. So now we got 50 pixels. Again, this is just on the section that the radius will show up. And then we can have a border, and so let's make a full border. Let's make it 10 pixels, and let's make it red or yellow, just so we can see it. So you can see what's going on there. We got the border, and then we can have shadows. We can put a drop shadow on here where it'll go around the background. But let's do this. Let's make this one. Let's make this one a small section, and then let's go into here. And let's make some bigger corners, and let's make it full border. And again, let's make it a black border, and then we'll try our 40% drop shadow. And again, we're not really seeing anything, so let me go into the background. Let's change our background to white. Now you can see a little bit of a shadow, and that's the problem with the ClickFunnels shadows, is they're not very big. So again, in a case like that, I would normally go in and do some custom CSS to make that shadow bigger so it makes it stand out a little bit more. But we can also do an inner shadow, and so you see that little bit of a drop on the inside there. I kind of like to use the inner shadows quite a bit. The advanced CSS, float, and position, I never use either of them in there because normally, especially when you're using position, you're going to be doing other CSS along with it. So you might as well just do it as CSS and not do it as position in here at all. Okay, so now let's go into a row. So here's a row, same thing, click on the gear, and so we can give it a background image as well again. So let's just say we want to grab something to do with Russell here as our background image, and let's make our section wider, and let's get rid of some of this left and right padding and the top and bottom. Oops, well, we can leave that there, just so we can see the section a little bit better. So we got an image in the background, which again here, because we have text and stuff in here, generally speaking, you would not do that. So we will just delete that out. But again, actually, let's put an image back in here because you still have the same thing here. So you do have full parallax. I wasn't sure about that because I don't think I've ever used it. I use parallax if I use it on a section, but you can have the parallax image on a row as well. And then of course you have all the same options as you had for your section background images. So let's just take that image out just by deleting it. So we can change our background color, again, of that row only. And you can change your text color. So you can make your text color whatever you want here, but then it'll be overridden if you put in a different text color or a different font or anything else in the elements. It will override it. But now here's a nice part here is you can change the width of this section. Of this row. So sometimes you want the row to be 100% like this. Other times you say, no, I only want it to be like 40% wide. And even then you might want to float it to the left or float it to the right. And so it's a nice way to be able to move things around on a page by doing the floats and stuff. Then, of course, we have padding. And as you see here, padding is always inside the element itself. That's why you can't do negative padding, because you'd have to be going outside of the element if you did negative padding, and that wouldn't really make any sense. So you got your bottom and your top, and then you again have your left and your right. And the padding is the amount of space from the edge of the element into where the other, let me put it this way, it's the edge of the row to the edge of the elements. That's more accurately the way to say it. So it's basically the amount of white space around the outside of the inside of the row or the section. Hopefully I explained that well enough. Whereas the margin always is the area on the outside of the row or section or something else. So padding is always this part on the inside, and margin is always the area on the outside. So let's go into our advanced for our row. Same thing as before. We can put in some rounded corners. We can put in a border, and we can put in any kind of a drop shadow or inner drop shadow that we would like. And then let's just go quickly to columns, because it's all pretty much the same as before. So let's just come here. So in here we have one big column inside of this section, inside of this row. Here we have two different columns. So let's just come up to the one up here, and let's just go to the first column. And so you can set the margin on the column independent of each other. So why don't I do this? Let me just put a little bit of a border around the outside of this row. Now inside of the column, we can see here now we are moving away from the top of the row. We can again put in an image inside of that. And again, here it's full parallax as well. I mean, I swear I didn't think you could do full parallax on all of these elements, but you can. So we could do 100% width and height, and here we go. So it'll actually be bounded inside of here. But what you're going to see is this is giving you the background color, the background image of the column. So it's going to be sticking out on either side. Now, if we come in here and we make this more narrow, eventually, I guess we're always going to have that little bit because of the gutter. We're always going to have like that 15 pixels sticking out the side right there. So let's come back into here. Let's get rid of that. We can take that out. We can do a background color, of course. We see the same thing. And then if we want to put some space at the top and the bottom inside of the column, we can. And then let's go to advanced. Again, we can do corners, and we can do borders, and we can do drop shadows. And then here again, float and the whatnot. You could do side margins. Sometimes this was a little bit buggy, but it appears to be working now. So that is definitely something you could play with, is, if you really want to get kind of something more square-ish around an image or something, play around with the side margins and see if you can get that to work. So that is all I'm going to go through in this video. In the next video, we are going to finish up by talking about, first off, the animations, and then we're also going to talk about everything we can do down here and setting up to make it easier to be able to do any kind of custom coding with CSS or JavaScript by setting up our data titles and using our CSS ID selectors. So, as always, if you got any questions, just let me know.